Is Framji Menwala. Framji Menwala is currently Program Director Communication and Design at Habib University. He has taught at numerous institutions. His research interests include performance literature and history, visual and cultural studies, theater and politics, media and film, and all forms of theory. Framji, over to you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Thank you for coming. It is my great pleasure to introduce the gentleman on my left, who needs no introduction, H.M. Naqvi. H.M. Naqvi is the award-winning author of Homeboy, published by Random House in 2009. The debut was hailed as a remarkably engaging novel that delights as it disturbs by the New York Times, and as a genre-busting, page-turning book that fuses slang, literary discourse, pop culture, and politics, history and comedy, East and West. It has been translated into German, Italian, and Portuguese, and was awarded the DSC Prize at the Jaipur Literature Festival in 2011, sorry. Naqvi has worked in the financial services industry and taught creative writing at Boston University. He has appeared on CNN, BBC, National Public Radio, and written for Caravan, Forbes, Freeman's, and The Global Post. His second novel, a comic epic, which is what we will discuss today, set in Karachi, is expected from HarperCollins this year. Hussein?
Inshallah.
And I think we start. Hussein wants to read an excerpt from the novel and then engage a conversation about it.
Thank you, Framji, my partner in crime often at events like these. My second novel is titled The Selected Works of Abdullah the Cossack, and it begins something like this. My head is like a rubbish heap. You have to sift through the muck to find a working toaster. When I was 11, I overheard one of my brothers telling another that I am a bastard. They say if you scale the cliff at Shah Nurani, you happen upon the clenched mouth of a cave. They say if you manage to crawl in, you are your father's son. I do not patronize Shah Nurani. If I am a bastard, I am a bastard. But you might find me at the seaside shrine of Abdullah Shah Ghazi on a Thursday night, inhaling hashish among the malcontents who congregate on the rocky southern slant of the hill. It's always a carnival. There are fortune tellers, bodybuilders, thugs, troubadours, transvestites, women, and sweet, rowdy children. I am at home there. When I enter the cool confines of Agha's supermarket to purchase smoked Gouda, however, shoppers part to give me way. Those who knew me once turn to memorize the sodium content in shelved cans of French onion soup. The last time I was there, dragging myself through the aisles, I called out to this busty 66-year-old Persian cat who had just had her 55th birthday. Although she's married to a portly patrician now, she would be at the Olympus in the old days, making eyes at the young men with carnations fixed in their lapels. When I hooted, "Sweetie," she paused for a moment, as if recalling to cross off the loaf of bread from her list, before disappearing around the corner from the shoe polish and lighter fluid. Verily, decency is dead or dying. I have been mulling some permutation of the mytho-poetic legacy of Abdullah Shah Ghazi since the fateful day my father asked me to punctuate the following sentence. That is that, and that is not, that is not. Naturally, I retorted, comma after the sixth word, sir. Papa could be difficult, but I knew then that he had, in an indiscreet way, communicated to me his aspiration for me to be a phenomenologist, even if he would deny it vehemently afterwards. There is no doubt in my mind that my mother would have encouraged the project. A fine lady of Afghan blood and deportment, Mummy spoke Urdu like a native because her clan claims to have settled in the subcontinent since the reign of Sher Shah of Bihar. When she entered a room, people squinted as if she were wrought of light. If I close my eyes, I can recall hers, bright blue and sunny like the sea at Sumniani. Married to a cousin at 17, the Khan of this or that Khanate, she ran away when she realized that he was only interested in hunting partridge. She met Papa at the Olympus in 29 when visiting an aunt twice removed for high tea. She had 5 sons with rhyming names: Ataullah, Bakaullah, Abdullah, Fazlullah, and Rahimullah, aka Babu. When Mummy passed, the family became unglued. I would ask everybody standing uncomfortably in a corner to come spill into the front. तकल्लुफ ना कीजिए, अपना घर समझ के आप तशरीफ रख लीजिए. All right, now that we're cozy, I'll continue. After retiring as a major from the army in the 70s, Ataullah moved to a palatial residence in the suburbs featuring a diamond-shaped pool, while Bakaullah, once a card-carrying communist, immigrated to some dusty corner of the Near East where he reportedly runs a logistics and transportation business. Tony, my favorite brother and boon companion, left for college in the United States of America before squatting on our estate in Sindh, where he cultivates women and produces wine. Our very own Vinos de la Tierra. I am certain I was Mummy's favorite. She raised me to be myself. I am not a bad man, not a particularly good one either, and I'm not good for much anymore. I am a fat man and an anxious one. The insides of my thighs chafe when I climb down the stairs from my quarters. I avoid loitering downstairs because my youngest brother, Babu, lives on the mezzanine with his plain, moon-faced wife, Nargis, a lass with all the charm of an opossum, and his twin boys. The arrangement poses a bit of a problem because I love the children, those crazy little childoos. When they manage to break free, they sneak up on me like those ninja warriors and clamber atop my domed belly. We sing, cavort, sneak up to the roof to observe the silently sundering clouds, the odd meteor. We startle the nesting crows to put the fear of God in their black hearts. When their rasping protests ring in the still of the evening, Nargis the opossum comes bounding up the stairs. She does not approve. She changes the rules all the time. Rule number 1, no taking the children to the roof at night, or during the day, or the afternoon, or at sunset. Rule number 2, no feeding the children walnuts, or custard apples, chili chips, sugar wafers. Rule number 3, no singing Tom Jones to the children, or Cliff Richards, Boney M., the Benjamin Sisters. And even though I cradled him in my arms, carried him on my shoulders, even though I taught him how to whistle, how to say thank you, thanku, he said, the aforementioned Babu is not an ally. Many years ago, he laughed and when informed I'm a bastard. Like many, like most, he quietly judged me then, he quietly judges me now. I don't care. I'm not going anywhere. A fortune teller named Sarbuland once told me, Tum lambi race ke ghode ho. Or, you are the horse of the long race. But, I am not the same man I was yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, Hussain. Could you tell them all a little bit about the novel itself, the framework for it?
I will again invite all of those who are uncomfortably in the corner to come and spill into the front. There's no reason why one should...
and there's some jaga over here and over there. Yeah?
Listen to discourse on one's feet. Only you, Sallu bhai. बेतकल्लुफ आप आ जाइए सब लोग. Sorry, you were asking...
a little bit about the novel so that they have a sense of what it's about, who this narrator is.
The narrators are defined by their voice, and I think that you all would have gotten a sense of the character, but from my reading, the character is the scion of a business family, a Karachi business family. He's a septuagenarian and lives in a canton of the city that is not frequented much anymore, towards Numaish and garden, and has to contend with the change of fortunes, and contend with a family that has fallen apart, literally and figuratively, and you know, this in a way was the way I conceived of a novel in Karachi. This might be a metaphor of where we have been and where we are now. So Abdullah the Cossack is large, literally and figuratively. He's sort of larger than life in that there's more to him than just the character. There's a story of the city in the protagonist of this protagonist of the story, in the heart of the story.
Okay, I remember when you gave me a draft to read 3.5 years ago now, and I remember being struck by how much the novel is actually about the city. It's about Karachi, even though it's both a memoir of sorts, and the selected works are actually about his autobiographical stories about himself when he was younger, and the contemporary narrative about his present condition. But it is as much about these characters as about Karachi itself and the remarkable transformations that have happened. Could you talk a little bit about what compelled you to write a novel about Karachi, what it is about Karachi that interests you, excites you?
If I don't have a good nihari every 10 days, I can't function. So, you know, for good nihari, as nihari connoisseurs would know, one must make a pilgrimage to Dastagir, which is in Federal Bay Area, and Javed Nihari. And, so my family resides from Federal Bay Area to the nicer parts of town. My family is from Karachi and spans the city, and so it is. Karachi is something that is part of me, and I was compelled to try to render the city on page, which is a tall ambition. I may well fall flat on my face, because it's a city that has now, by some accounts, become the 6th largest in the world. So it was sort of, one had to think about how does one come at such a such a phenomenon, and so the compulsion is that it's my city, and the challenge was how does one render it on the page. I hope that answers some of your questions.
So how did you actually confront the challenge? How did you? I remember you told me you would take endless walks around Garden, searching for the right house to describe, searching for the right road to describe, those kinds of things. So,
so I know, my Dadyal, when they arrived, stayed in Paposh Nagar. My Nanyal stayed in Numaish. And so one knows various cantons of the city, but the city keeps changing. So, Gadap was a village on the periphery of the city, and now it's part of the administrative dispensation. For this particular project, I would actually walk the streets and trying to reimagine what particular neighborhoods would have been like before, and so हम एक सड़क पे टहल रहे थे, और वहाँ कुछ चंद लौंडे जो हैं वो क्रिकेट खेल रहे थे, तो और वहाँ एक बड़ा खूबसूरत शानदार नहीं मगर पुराना घर था. तो हमने कहा ये किसका घर है, तो उसने बच्चे ने कहा कि ये इन साहब का घर है. तो फिर हम घर आके हमने रिसर्च की, और I tried to get into that house and at first the proprietor was somewhat, not the proprietor, but the person who inhabited the house was somewhat wary of talking to this bald novelist, but he warmed up and spoke about how his family in the 40s would rent a tonga for the day and head to Malir to pick fruit from the orchards. And so the texture of life was very different at a certain juncture. And as a novelist, I need to get these sorts of things right. I don't have a great imagination. I have to work with what I see around me. So that is an example of how I rediscovered parts of the city. And the city again will keep growing. So I mean, the neighborhoods in the city that figure in the news that weren't around 10 years ago, like Qazafi Town, which is near the steel mills, Pipri. All these neighborhoods weren't around when I was in my childhood.
Yeah. So this is the second panel that I've moderated with you where you've said that you don't have an imagination. And one, I don't think that's true. I mean, I think he has a fantastic imagination. But why don't you think so? Seriously.
I can't. If were I to set a novel in Papua New Guinea, I would have to go to Papua New Guinea to try to understand. In this day and era, one can research on the net, but the smells, the sounds, the texture of life is something that I cannot recreate from my thoughts. गार्डन में एक ज़माने में गार्डन में सदर में शेर की गूंजने की आवाज़ आती थी. Can you imagine now that you could hear a lion roar from the zoo because you can't hear your own thoughts in Karachi now. But there was a time when you could hear the lion at night, and बच्चों की वालदाएं कहती थी कि शेर अगर तुम सही से सोगे नहीं तो शेर जो है वो आ जाएगा या क्या. तो मतलब आप बच्चे को कहेंगे, वो बच्चा कहेगा कि आप शायद खिसकी हुई हैं या आप ये that's not possible. And only by drawing on oral histories and doing some research can somebody like me appreciate the texture of life, texture of reality.
Fair enough, but it's the imaginative use you put to the information or the experiences that you gather that I think is more important in terms of fiction writing. You can, any number of us could go out and probably gather these oral narratives and details. Not any number of us could actually turn them into a narrative that has resonances in multiple directions and complications about that reveal to us what the city was and what the city has become.
ये हमें सलाहियत है इतनी बेशक. But another part of the process which is that when I put a bunch of characters on the page, they do things, and each episode is pregnant with possibility, and so I don't map out the novel. I don't have the ability to map up the novel at its inception. The characters suggest what should happen next, and so even in that way, it's not so much my agency or my imaginative prowess. It's the characters suggesting what needs to be done.
Sure, but when you go back and you revise, right? My sense of the draft I read 3 years ago and the portions of the draft that I have read, not the revised manuscript, is that there is significantly more shape and structure now than there was 3 years ago, and that is your doing. So even though your characters go off in multiple directions, you do impose, after you have discovered things, that shape, that structure. And do you find that process actually limiting? Do you find it actually useful? The shaping of it after the fact. Unlike Dickens, who mapped out his novels and then serialized them, right? So, in a sense, Dickens had to know where he was going before he had even written the first word of his novel.
I am if I don't write 3, 4, 500 words of prose a day, I feel worthless. My sort of, I work diligently, I work every day, and when I'm not writing, when I'm editing, I don't really, I don't get a kick out of editing. But it's imperative to mold the shape of clay into and watch it harden and sculpt it and keep polishing it, and I enjoy molding it and getting my hands dirty. The chiseling is not as much is not as compelling to me.
but you do a really fine job of it, I have to say.
तुम्हारी मोहब्बत है.
I mean, really, it's really so. I mean, reading the sentences, reading the paragraphs, it's so much sharper 3 years later than the draft that I read. So really, congratulations. Very compelling.
Let me ask you. I have also solicited. I've also solicited some oral history from you,
Yes.
given that your grandfather established the first major hotel in Karachi, which was Hotel Grand in Malir.
It wasn't the first major hotel, but it was an early major hotel, yeah. Yeah, but it wasn't really in Karachi. It was a resort because Malir was not ever considered part of Karachi when he built that hotel. So even when I was a kid, when we traveled to the hotel, it was like traveling through miles and miles and miles of countryside before we actually arrived there. And today, there is not one stretch of land from here to where it used to be that is undeveloped. I mean, everything is developed. And he used to have a chiku orchard and a banana orchard and a chicken farm. So, yeah, I mean, and that's not so long ago. That's the 60s and 70s.
And if I remember correctly, or if I understand correctly, the Grand Hotel was the only hotel in Karachi with a swimming pool.
Is that true? Uncle Salu will know. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it had a huge swimming pool. They did, yeah.
So now that the audience has weighed in, I think we should open it up to some questions from...
Already? Okay. Do they know enough about the novel to ask questions? I have one question, actually, before we open it. Can you talk about this family a little bit? Abdullah's brothers and the family itself, and where the inspiration for these particular individuals come from, or the idea of this particular family in the context of a Karachi family?
Karachi's history at best is about 300 years old. Karachi ceded to the Talpurs in 1795 after there were 3 sieges, and Karachi finally ceded to the Talpurs. And then in 1831, I think Miani fell to the British. So it had become important enough by that time for the British to seize it. So unlike Lahore, which has a history that extends into antiquity, Karachi, 3,000 years, and Lahore apparently was, or is said to have been founded by Lord Ram's son, Law. Karachi's history is 300 years old. So the old families go back, like the old Karachi families that still inhabit this town, and go back about 5-6 generations. And I wanted to, I met many old families from the city. There were Boras and Khojas. There's some old Hindu families that still remain in the city. And so the family of Abdullah the Cossack is one such old family that was built up by one of their forefathers, and from a raddi ki dukan, they sort of prospered, and they say that a civilization or a family lasts 3 generations, and this is the tail end of that generation. There are 5 brothers. There's a piece of real estate. They all they have nothing else except this house, and there's So there is this very familiar conflict. I think everybody in this room is familiar with this trope, but it also serves as a metaphor for the city and where we are.
Okay.
What is the reference to the word Cossack? Are they from? Were they Cossacks in the ancestry or what? What is the reference?
आपसे मरासिम है, हम आपसे शायद बाद में ये बात करें, but I don't want to reveal what the Cossack is. It doesn't have to do with what you think. It's
not.
I mean,
But each of the brothers has a nickname, and this is Abdullah's.
yes, in that way, yeah.
Yeah.
Should we now?
Yeah, sure. Questions from the audience?
So you referred to transformation earlier. In a bigger picture, which is the most important transformation about the city that you write in the book?
You know, I'm not an anthropologist or sociologist. I'm not a historian. So there are just I mean, you know, the easy answer is demographically it's changed, and the population has increased exponentially. But there's also, I feel, in the book, as far as the book goes, a sense that a nostalgist sense of nostalgists, not necessarily nostalgic, but nostalgist sense of how there was a certain ethos to the city that is more difficult to discern now. There might have been a time where the administrators took their job seriously. Us denizens adhered to certain principles in a way that is also difficult to discern today. And it's not unique to this city. It's in Delhi, the old Delhi wala will say that ये शहर वो वहाँ शिकवा ये है कि दिल्ली पंजाबी हो गया. तो मतलब पंजाब से immigration, you know, there was a big immigration, a lot of immigration into Delhi. So the old दिल्ली वाले का ये शिकवा होता है. बॉम्बे वाले के मतलब महाराष्ट्रियंस कहते हैं ये हमारा शहर है, मगर कभी उनका शहर नहीं रहा. तो हर शहर का अपना एक मसला होता है. और कराची में, like any big city, I think has been dramatically affected by such dynamics.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, to follow up on that, one of the things that changes over the course of the novel is the demographic of the city. So the earlier, more cosmopolitan sensibility that Abdullah writes about in his memoirs, in his selected works, is less present in the contemporary sections of the novel. So I think that's also part of the transformation that the novel shows, without giving too much of it away.
This is a sneak preview, right? So I can only deliver what has been advertised.
I mean, we could tell you the plot, but you know, I don't think that would be fun.
When you were talking of when you were comparing Karachi to Lahore, in Karachi, which wasn't there previously, post 1960, there is no ownership of this city. We look at it as a stepping stone for something better. Unlike Lahore or Peshawar or Islamabad, where there's actually ownership by the citizens of the city.
I agree with you. You know, the heterogeneity, demographic heterogeneity of the city is its strength and its weakness. And so Karachi is the only city in Pakistan where you will come across Memans and Boras and Khojas and Hindus and Christians. You'll get Catholics, Protestants, Goan Catholics, Sindhis who've been settled in the city for generations, Sindhis who've just arrived after the floods, Baloch, so it's one of the most amazing cities, not only in Pakistan, one of the most unique cities, not only in Pakistan but all of South Asia. Madras is and Bangalore are very homogeneous, but Bangalore is run like a clock, and Lahore is run by the Sharif Bradran, and no matter what thinks of their politics, they run the city like that is enviable. And so, culturally, this city is unique, but because of this heterogeneity, there is no ownership. Yes.
She has a question. From the excerpt that you read just now, I'm sorry, why can't Pakistani or Asian writers get away from the fabulism thing, the Orientalist fabulism, and the whole thing of the narrator being slightly sort of mocking the sort of rhyming names, and the sister-in-law is in a possum, and the number one and the number two? Why can't there be a sort of more generous humanity? I mean, when you talk about the city and your love of the city, etc., one wants to read that. I'm sorry, the book is written, but I just feel it's so familiar, it's deja vu. I've heard it since,
Can I answer that?
Why? Yeah. What is this? Why do
actually, the novel is partly about that. So it's about exactly that sensibility. So it's partly about a particular character and the way in which that kind of Orientalist sensibility and nostalgia work hand in hand about the past of the city. So in a sense, it's a very complicated way of actually addressing exactly what you just said.
All right. Well, I await with
without giving it away.
A novel is not a fable, or a good novel is not a fable. Paulo Coelho writes fables, and he's good for what he does, but it's not great literature. And I don't profess to be an expert on great literature, or haven't written anything, but a novel is a much more complicated beast, and you can't reduce it to some sort of binary way. Okay, this is Orientalist or this. I mean, this is the anxieties of a man at the autumn of his life, who has found that his life has not been particularly worthwhile. And so there cannot be a great confidence in his worldview. He's a man who has to contend with certain realities about himself. So he's actually, I disagree completely that he's not mocking. It's actually self-deprecation.
No, you are mocking him, sort of thing. The narrator.
He's not actually.
Okay, well, just from that excerpt, it's much slightly dirt or bar kind of thing about this person.
It's a lot more nuanced than either mocking or not, and I think that's part of what I really enjoyed reading it, was that it functions. It hits you on many different levels,
but can
emotionally
we hear about
and
how
intellectually.
You write? What is your modus operandi?
It's incredibly funny.
It is funny.
I'm rushing to buy it, so I couldn't stop laughing.
Adabas. I write about 500-600 words a day, and I work till 6 in the morning, and I work at night. And I've been doing that for about 10 years.
And not often at home. You don't write at home.
At night I do write at home.
But in the early part of the day.
Fine. Please.
Okay. So
part of what appealed to me about Homeboy was it's not about Homeboy, it's about the two novels, but the topicality of Homeboy in terms of South Asian or Muslim boys in New York, and it's so cliche, but post 9/11 realities or whatever. Not that the book was cliche, me saying post 9/11 is cliche, but I'm just wondering if, as an author, you worry about ever potentially narrowing your readership by writing a book about Karachi, having gone from writing a book that is accessible to so many other people.
100 Years of Solitude, Marquez is much feted and rightfully feted opus. Deals with the politics of a South American backwater. But Marquez writes with such vim and vigor and in such a compelling way that it seems like it's our story. Marquez, if you 100 Years of Solitude, if you go to Itwar Bazaar, you will inevitably find a copy of Marquez, or not a copy, several copies of Marquez. So he has resonance in Karachi. The battle between the left and the right in Colombia and at the turn of the century has resonance for us now. So I think if you write a good story, it will have resonance no matter what, where it's set. A good story should be able to transcend its topicality, Chekhov was writing about the middle class anxieties of turn of the century Russians, but Chekhov is much translated and has great resonance. So one can belabor the point, but I guess you get the gist.
Thank you for writing a book about Karachi, because I think the last one that I sort of was about Karachi was Salt and Saffron by Kamila Shamsi, and then we had the 9/11 novels. So thank you, and I hope I read it. Another thing is that, what do you mean there's lack of cosmopolitanism in Karachi?
I don't mean lack of cosmopolitanism in that way. What I mean is a diminishment of the kind of diversity that existed at the time of partition and immediately after. And even up till, I would say, the 60s, where there were many other nationalities who were present in the city, who are not here anymore, or at least not in the numbers that they existed in the 60s. I mean, and I think that is part of the diminishment, and that is part of what the novel also is about.
This is not the first novel set in Karachi, or not even the second. So I can name there was 38 Bahadrabad. Then there was Adam Zameenzad's 13th House. And recently there is Bilal Tanveer's The Scatter Here is Too Great. There's Omar Shahid Hamid's, he's very prolific, so now he's got 3 novels set in Karachi. And who else? I mean, there's
City by the Sea.
City by the Sea.
City by the Sea. And so there is, but so there is now. There wasn't much, but now Karachi has finally arrived in the discourse of fiction, and it's exciting because we are the 6th largest city in the world, and there should be so many novels about Karachi that you can't count.
Yeah.
Right.
But those are only the English novels. I mean, I'm sure there are Urdu writers, Sindhi writers, right?
Do we have time for more questions?
Questions? Yeah, we have.
I just have a question regarding, based on what you said about that imagination element. I'm just wondering, I didn't read the novel, honestly, but just wondering that the characters which are there, are these the imaginary characters, or you can say that there might be the characters from your, based on your observation from your surrounding, and how much do you need to live the characters while you're writing? Because at times there are writers who said,
how much do I need to
I mean, you
live?
need to live their lives. Because there are writers who often said कि जी हम जब लिखते हैं तो हम कैरेक्टर की ज़िंदगी जी रहे होते हैं. So if you talk about that imagination factor, keeping in mind, so how do you evolve your characters? How do you create your characters as a writer?
Characters are, it's as if you create something out of nothing, so it's as if you're looking at a blank canvas, and from that blank canvas you perhaps put down a name, Ataullah, right? And from that name you have to blow life into it, and it is something that you have to summon your imagination, but your imagination is contingent upon the people you know, and so there are हमारे कैरेक्टर्स में एक शबाहत कुछ लोगों की आती है. With Homeboy, I remember somebody coming up and thanking me, saying thanks for putting me in your novel. And I'm like, you're most welcome, and I have no clue how this person I had nothing, but to write a character that somebody can be, that a reader can empathize with, is, I think, the greatest compliment that a writer can get. I believe in character-based novels. I think Charles Dickens, we remember Charles Dickens, we remember Shakespeare because they wrote such compelling characters. They were such compelling characters that you think of Scrooge has almost become a verb. And Oliver Twist you remember Oliver Twist, not really what happens at the end, but you remember this child who is orphaned and has to negotiate life. Philosophically, I'm very partial towards this mode of writing, as opposed to plot-driven novels, which are like thrillers or mysteries. And I'm not denigrating, but I'm partial to this mode of writing, and I would be happy if you came up to me after you've read the novel and said, "Oh, thanks for putting me in my novel."
But there are structures and buildings and roads in the novel that are real, historically real. And they are as much characters, I think, in the novel as the living, breathing characters themselves. So I think part of the way in which these characters seem familiar to us is because the background, which is not really background, it is as much foreground as the characters, are familiar to us. Can I read one little bit? From early, it's not from late. It's the description of the lodge. You read it. From here. Wholesale destruction of the Bedouin variety. Wo paro. From there. Read it.
On Framji's insistence, I will maybe end this session with a paragraph that
to the end.
To the end, my God, Framji, you're a real demanding moderator.
No, it's really good.
Although there has not been any wholesale destruction of the Bedouin variety in the subcontinent, historical preservation has been wanting. My brother Tony told me that his childhood policeman friend, Hur, aka Hawkeye, presently in the police, narrated the following story. Yehudi Masjid, or Megan Shalom, as it was known, came under my watch when I served in Garden. When I heard that the land mafia was eyeing the property, I went to investigate. The caretaker, this genial old lady named Rachel, said most of her kind had left after the wars with Israel. All her documents were in order, title deed, expense report, so I tried to secure the site, but my superior resisted. If I were a better man, I would have stood up for it. The synagogue was raised in the summer of '88. That's not even yesterday. All right, ladies and gentlemen, show's over. Thanks for coming.
I know. So you didn't tell them the most important part. The home that they live in is a hotel. That's the one. The lodge. Anyway.